The moon court had prepared scrolls. That was the first thing Mira noticed when she walked through the doors. Not one scroll, not the kind used for ceremony or welcome. 5. Bound with succession seals and laid flat on the council table where she could not pretend not to see them. She was 25 years old. The court looked at her as if she had already lived the useful portion of her life and was now standing in the way of its continuation. Lord Caedmon stood at the head of the table. He had the manner of a man who had been waiting for this day for a long time and had rehearsed his concern until it looked like duty. He said the fertility records had been reviewed. He said the healer assessments over 5 years showed no evidence of successful royal bonding in Mira's womb. He said the kingdom could not sustain the risk of a childless succession. He said the council had the authority and the duty to recommend the removal of a Luna who had not fulfilled the terms of her position. Healer Vessa stood to his left. Her eyes did not meet Mira's. That told Mira more than the scrolls. Lady Isolde stood near the court's edge, dressed in pale gold that might have been coincidental, and was not. She had been in that color for 3 weeks, Mira had noticed. Alaric sat on the throne. He was 25, the same age as Mira, and he looked like a man being consumed from the inside by something he could not name and had not found the courage to refuse. He loved her. Mira knew that. She also knew that knowing it was not the same as trusting it. She had stood in his court for 5 years. She had negotiated food routes during the winter famine when the eastern passes closed. She had kept an informal list of orphan pups after border raids and made sure they had names and hearths before the season turned. She had comforted other women in the palace kitchens after failed moon cycles, sitting with them in the dark without asking them to perform their grief in any particular way. She had questioned, quietly, why fertility records were sealed under council authority and not accessible to the women whose bodies they documented. None of this was in Caedmon's scrolls. None of it was relevant to the question the court had decided to ask. She looked at Alaric. She said, "Did you ever ask what they did to me?" The court went very still. Alaric's jaw tightened. His wolf pressed against the surface of his expression and did not break through. He said nothing. Mira held his gaze for long enough that the silence became its own kind of answer. Then she reached up and removed her Luna veil. She set it on the council table beside the scrolls. She did not throw it. She did not tear it. She set it down the way you set down something that no longer has the right to define you. Then she walked out. The court doors closed behind her. Outside, the winter air hit her like a verdict. Her knees shook once. She did not let them fail. She pressed one hand to her ribs, where the cold had lived for 5 years. After every fertility ritual, the cold came. Silver and deep, not the kind of cold that belonged to weather, the kind that belonged to something done to her that had been called help. She had told Alaric once that the treatments left a pain she could not describe. He had pulled her close and said it would pass. She had believed him for a long time. Now she understood she had been believing the wrong thing. Her knees shook once more. She started walking. The road south from the palace followed the winter lake for 3 miles before it turned toward the lower territories. Mira had walked it in summer, in better times, when she and Alaric had ridden the tree line together, and she had thought they were building something that could last. She walked it now alone in the dark. The snow fell without sentiment. The cold was the kind that goes through, rather than stopping at the surface. She had no destination. She only knew she needed to be somewhere that was not the palace, and she would decide what came next when she arrived. The lake appeared through the trees at the base of a ridge, frozen silver, flat and silent. She stood at its edge and looked at it for a while. The walk had not cleared her mind. It had emptied it. There is a kind of grief that does not announce itself with crying, but with the simple removal of every assumption you had made about your life and the quality of the silence that remains. She had assumed Alaric would ask questions before he sat silent on a throne while she was removed from it. She had assumed love meant something in a council chamber. She had assumed 5 years of everything she had given, everything she had endured in private, everything she had not said, because saying it might be used against him would amount to more than 5 scrolls and a man who could not answer her. Her knees failed. She was on the ice before she understood she had fallen. The cold pressed up through her palms. The silver bruises under her ribs ached the way they always ached in winter, the way they always ached after Healer Vessa's hands. She had called it the cost of hope for 5 years. She lay on the ice and looked at the sky and decided she would stay there until she found the strength to begin the next thing, whatever the next thing was. Then the lake moved, not cracked, not shifted, moved the way still water moves when light enters it from below. Silver spread under the ice in a circle, widening from the place where Mira lay, warm in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. She pressed her hands flat against the ice and watched. A figure appeared above the frozen water, not standing on it, not walking, simply present the way the moon is simply present. She was made of old light and older attention. She did not speak first. She reached into the space between them and drew from it something that had been waiting. A child, small and radiant and entirely still, made of starlight rather than flesh, but present in the way that mattered. She placed the child in Mira's arms. The moon goddess looked at her. Mira said, "I have nothing left to give." The moon goddess said, "Then hold what they could not take." The light remained for 1 moment more. Then the lake was still and dark again, and Myra was alone on the ice, with a child breathing softly in her arms. She lay there for a while longer. Then she sat up. Then she stood. She held the child against her chest and looked at the road south. She started walking again. This time she had a direction. At the palace, every moonstone in the nursery chamber began to glow. Alaric felt it happen before he reached his chambers. A warmth through the pack link that was not his wolves and not his command. Something younger than either. Something that had never been in the kingdom before and belonged to it anyway. He stood in the corridor outside the empty nursery and understood, in the specific and devastating way you understand things that arrive too late, that the light was coming from Mira. Lord Kedman found him there within the hour. He said the moon had sent the throne in air. He said the child's light had touched 3 nursery stones simultaneously. He invoked Hear law. Any child marked by royal moonlight within the kingdom's borders belonged to the throne, he said. The cradle guards must be dispatched before dawn. Alaric stood in the corridor and looked at the glowing stones. He said the guards would not be dispatched tonight, Kedman said. The Succession Council had authority. Alaric said he was still the Alpha King. They looked at each other. Neither said the thing they were actually arguing about, which was whether Alaric had made a mistake in that courtroom and whether it could be corrected. The decision was not made that night, but the delay cost something. Both of them knew it. Outside, Mira carried the moonchild south through the snow. She did not know about the nursery stones. She only knew she needed to reach the place she had heard about, but never been allowed to visit. The moonchild opened its eyes. They were full of starlight. In that light, Mira saw shapes. Other women, standing behind her in the reflection of those eyes, banished, silenced, waiting to be named. She held the child more firmly. She walked faster. The moon sanctuary was hidden between frozen pines and silver cliffs, built into the rock face as if the mountain had grown around it deliberately, over years of women needing a place to survive. Mira arrived as the second day's light was rising. A door opened before she knocked. She was brought inside without ceremony. She was given bread and a blanket and a place near the fire. No one asked who she was. No one asked about the child except whether he was warm. The simplicity of that question undid something in her chest that had been held very tight for a long time. In the morning, Mother Celine came to find her. She was an older woman with the patience of someone who had survived something the world was not willing to acknowledge as survivable, and had built an institution on the far side of it. She moved without hurry. She sat down across from Mira the way you sit when you have time and you know it, and you are not going to waste it performing urgency. She looked at Mira. She looked at the moonchild. She looked at the way Mira was holding the child. Not with the careful distance of someone managing something precious, but with the full weight of someone who had already decided this was hers to protect, she said. A child sent by the moon does not prove the mother's worth. She let that sit for a moment. The mother was worthy before the light came. Mira held the child and let that sentence settle in the place inside her that had been waiting for someone to say exactly that instead of asking her how long she had been trying, or whether she had considered other remedies, or whether she understood the succession implications. Mother Celine explained what the child was: a moon witness. Not compensation for suffering. Not a replacement for the children the court had quietly made impossible through other means. A witness sent when fertility law had buried its cruelty deep enough that nothing else could bring it to the surface. The moon witness appeared at the intersection of unjust law and hidden harm and the accumulated silence of women who had been given no other option. The child would reveal what the court had paid to keep invisible. Mira asked. What does it reveal? Mother Celine said, Show me your ribs. Mira lifted the edge of her sleeve. The silver bruises were there. 5 years' worth. Some old enough to have developed a texture. The particular quality of damage that has been present long enough to become familiar. Mother Celine looked at them for a long time. She said, Those are not from cold. Mira said, I know. She had known for some time. She had been afraid to finish the thought in a place where finishing it could be used to hurt Alaric or give Cadman a new angle. Mother Celine said, You have been protecting him at the cost of understanding what was being done to you. Mira said, Yes, Mother Celine said, That is over now. It was not comfort, it was fact. Mira received it as both. She was shown her room. She was shown the sanctuary's records, kept by women who had been here before her. She began to read them. She recognized some of the patterns, the same cold burn, the same healer's handwriting in the margins of the fertility assessments, the same succession council seal on the removal orders. 3 women before her. She had kept a private list. She had not known how to prove it. The moonchild pressed its face against her shoulder, and the light in the room shifted slightly warmer. She turned the page and kept reading. Alaric came on the 3rd day. He came without his guard formation, without a crown, without the document that would have given him legal authority to demand entry. He had snow in his hair and the expression of a man who had been thinking for 3 days and had arrived at something he did not like but could not argue away. The sanctuary ward stopped him at the gate. Mira came to stand on the other side of the bars. He said he came for her and the child. She said, "You still put my name beside possession." He said he wanted to understand, she said. "You had years." Something in his face went still in the way she recognized as the specific stillness of a person absorbing the full weight of a sentence they cannot disagree with. He said, "Will you let me look at the marks?" She showed him her ribs. He looked at the silver bruises for a long time without speaking. Then he said, "I called it hope," she said. "I called it endurance and love. But it was damage, and I told you it hurt after every treatment," he said. "Why didn't you tell me what it really was?" She looked at him directly. "Because you would have felt responsible, and then the council would have called my accusation political, and then the treatment would have been called necessary, and somehow you would have found a way to believe them, because believing them was less frightening than the alternative." She held the child. "I was protecting you, and it let them keep hurting me." He stood at the gate and could not enter. He did not ask to. He stayed for an hour, then he left. She watched him go and felt something that was not quite relief, and not quite grief, and was possibly just the specific quality of the air when something that has been held in tension finally goes slack. She went back inside and sat with the Moonchild until it was time to eat. Healer Vesa arrived 2 days later. She did not come willingly. She came because Lady Isolde brought her, and because Isolde had discovered something that had turned a duty she believed in into something she could no longer stand inside of. Isolde arrived first. She was wearing plain riding clothes, and the expression of a woman who has recently learned that the role she accepted was built on a lie she did not know was a lie. She set a document on the sanctuary table. She said, "My marriage contract was prepared 14 days before Mira's final fertility trial." She looked at Mira. "I did not know what that meant until I understood what the trial was." Mira said, "I know you did not." Isolde sat down. After a moment she said, "Will you let me stay until the trial and testify?" Mira said she could stay. Vesa stood in the corner when she arrived and looked at nothing in particular and said nothing for a long time. The Moonchild turned its face toward her. Silver light spread from the child across the room and rested on the marks on Mira's ribs and wrists. The marks brightened. "Evidence visible in light that the body had been keeping and waiting for this," Vesa said. "I was afraid of Kedman." Mira said, "I know." Vesa said, "That does not make it less than what it is." Mira said, "No, but it makes you someone who can say so now, and that is what is needed." Vesa confessed everything. The fertility silence curse, administered through routine treatment, not once, continuously for 5 years. She named the compounds. She named the specific cold burn that signaled the curse taking effect. She named the women before Mira, 3 of them, all removed for barrenness, all treated the same way. Mira sat with her arms around the Moonchild and felt the specific grief of having a truth, confirmed that you had almost known for years. It was not relief. It was not vindication. It was understanding that the worst of what you had feared was real, and that you had survived it anyway, and that surviving it obligated you to decide what to do with the knowing. She knew what to do. She had known since the Moonchild opened its eyes and she saw the other women standing in them. Kedman moved the day after Vesa's confession became known, he declared. Mira had stolen royal moonlight. He said the Moonchild had awakened nursery stones and therefore belonged to the throne by her law. He sent cradle guards. The sanctuary ward held them at the tree line. But the ward was old, and Kedman's lawyers were working through succession exemptions, and Mira could feel the edges of the ward thinning the way you feel a door straining. Inside, the women gathered, sorry, vanished after her second miscarriage, while the court recorded her loss as succession's instability. Hale, whose stillborn daughter had never been given a name, because nameless children did not appear in council records. Tova, the healer who had refused a fertility trial order and been stripped of her license and told her refusal was the real danger. Kala, who had not wanted children and had been declared unfit for the alliance bond she had been arranged into at 16. A wolf mother with 6 orphaned pups, raising them as hers because the border raid had left no one else to do it, and pack law did not recognize her claim. They formed a circle around Mira, each woman named what fertility law had done to her, not in accusation. In record, banished after miscarriage, replaced after stillbirth, declared barren without testing, denied the right to name a moon-chosen child, poisoned with silence and called insufficient, stripped of authority for refusing to participate in harm, measured by something that had been taken from her, and then blamed for the absence. Each naming added light to the circle. The moon-child grew brighter with each one. The ward solidified. The cradle guards stopped moving. Alaric, who had been standing at the tree line for an hour, sent the guards back. Kedmon appeared at his shoulder immediately. He said the succession council had emergency authority. Alaric said, "I am still the Alpha King." Kedmon said, "The throne could not afford to lose control of an heir marked by royal moonlight." Alaric said, "Your language describes children as inventory." Kedmon was quiet for one moment. Then he said he would call the Great Fertility Trial, full council, emergency succession powers, sanctuary protections suspended. Alaric said, "Call it." He said it the way people say things they are afraid of and have decided to face anyway. Before Kedmon could speak again, Alaric said, "And you should understand that a throne that humiliates women to secure heirs has already fallen." He walked back toward the palace. Kedmon watched him go. Then he drafted the trial documents. He also prepared something else, the cradle claim spell, an old instrument, older than the current heir law, used twice before in recorded history to pull a child's light from a contested guardian toward the palace nursery. He prepared it quietly, telling no one except the 2 healers he needed to execute it. It would run during the trial if argument failed. He expected argument to fail. The morning before the trial, Alaric came to the sanctuary gate without crown or guards. He came with Captain Soren, his most loyal guard captain, and told Soren to wait at the tree line and bear witness. He did not want what he was about to do to be private. He knelt outside the gate, not standing, kneeling, in the snow. Mira saw him from the doorway. She did not open the gate immediately. She waited. He said, "A Luna is not a womb wearing a crown." He said it to the gate, to the morning air, to the sanctuary, to anyone listening. Smira stepped to the gate, she said. "A sentence is not a law." He looked up. "I know," he said. "Then let us go the trial," she said, "and make it one." She held the moon child. She looked at the road to the moon court. She said, "I will not ask you to stand behind me," he said. "I will not stand ahead of you." They looked at each other through the gate bars. Then Mira opened the gate, not fully, enough to walk through. She walked toward the moon court with the moon child in her arms and Alaric walking beside her. Captain Soren joined them from the tree line. Behind them, without being asked, the sanctuary women came too. Not because they were summoned. Because they had their own reasons to be in that courtroom, and they were done waiting to be invited. The great fertility trial was held under a blood moon. Kedmon presented his case with the precision of a man who had prepared it across 5 years. He presented the heir law. He presented the nursery stone activation. He presented Mira's banishment as legally sound. He presented the moon child as property of the throne, he said. The child's light had entered the kingdom through royal pack-link resonance and therefore belonged to the Alpha bloodline before belonging to any banished woman. He said, sanctuary protection did not extend to children with demonstrable royal connection. He triggered the cradle claim spell. Mira entered through the moonlit side entrance before the spell could complete. She was not invited. She had not asked permission. She walked into the moon court with the moon child in her arms and stood at the center of the floor, and the court was so unprepared for her to walk in rather than be brought in that no one moved. She said, "I was not banished because I failed to carry life." She held the child firmly. "I was banished because the law needed my body to confess to a crime committed against it." She looked at the court. My body was not empty. It was filled with someone else's silence. Behind her, through the moonlit entrance, the sanctuary women stood visible in the doorway. Not demanding, not accusing, simply there. The moonchild lifted its face and the light expanded. Vessa's records appeared written in silver light above the council table. Isolde's pre-written bride contract appeared beside them. Sedmund's succession orders appeared. The fertility records from the 3 Lunas before Mira appeared with the same cold burn marks noted in the same handwriting. 3 women, the same treatment, the same silence, the same outcome. The moonchild was witnessing. Kedman said, the evidence was fabricated. He said lunar miracles had no standing in succession law. He said Mira had no court standing. He pushed the cradle claim spell to full activation. The moonchild began to fade. Not suddenly, steadily. The way starlight fades when something heavy presses down on it. The court watched. Alaric stepped forward. He did not use Alpha Command. He did not need to. He spoke the way someone speaks when they have finally understood what they should have understood earlier and are no longer managing the timing, he said. I let them measure my Luna by an air she could not carry because they would not let her carry it. The court was very quiet. I let silence answer when she asked what they did to her. He looked at Mira. I thought a throne without a child was unstable. He paused. But a throne that humiliates women to secure heirs has already fallen. He repeated the sentence she had been waiting years for him to find. A Luna is not a womb wearing a crown. Kedman said. The bloodline cannot survive sentiment. Mira said. You call it bloodline because possession sounds less holy. The court turned. The pack elders who had ridden 3 days to witness this trial looked at the evidence visible in silver light and made their decision. Kedman was arrested by Moonguard authority, not by Alaric's command. The succession lawyers withdrew. Healer Vessa's authority was stripped. Her full testimony was entered into record. But the cradle claim spell was still running. The moonchild was dimming in Mira's arms. She understood what was feeding it. The spell lived on claim, every ownership. Every time a child had been used as proof of a woman's worth, or a king's authority, or a throne's right to the future, she had to refuse all of it, including her own fear of losing what she had held for 11 days and already loved with a love that had no adequate name. She held the child and said, You were not given to prove me. The child pulsed once with light. You were not given to crown him. Another pulse. You were given to witness what they buried. The starlight flared, not gently, with the brightness of something that has been waiting to be seen by the right people in the right room. The cradle claim spell shattered. The nursery stones in the palace went dark. The pack link through the kingdom carried something that had never moved through it before. Not a command, not grief, the names of women who had been erased quietly by law and were now being said aloud. The sanctuary gates opened. The women walked into the moonlight. Sori and Hale and Tova and Kala and the wolf mother with her 6 pups and the widows and the foster mothers and the moon-chosen children with no bloodline names. The court saw them. It could not unsee them. Alaric knelt before the sanctuary women in the moon court. Not for Mira only, for every woman who had walked through those gates after the law was done with her, he said. The throne will no longer name women failed because it feared an empty cradle. Mira looked at him, she said. A sentence is not a law, he said. Then let us write the law. The new hair law took 3 weeks. Adopted heirs could be recognized. Moon-chosen heirs were protected. Fertility trials could not be public ritual. Independent healers must review all treatments. No Luna could be removed for childlessness alone. Miscarriage, stillbirth, infertility, and the refusal of pregnancy could not be grounds for exile. Children could not be claimed by throne without guardian consent. Sanctuary law was recognized. Fertility curse use was classified as treason. Isol drafted the medical oversight provision with Vessa's testimony as its foundation. She said she had been prepared as a vessel without understanding the system she was entering, and that made the drafting personal in a way she had not expected to feel. Vessa gave her full testimony. She accepted the removal of her authority. She said she had known for years what she was doing and had kept doing it. The testimony entered that into record, too. Alaric came to the sanctuary gate on the first full moon after the trial. He came without a crown, without guards, without any document that gave him authority over what was on the other side of the gate. He brought food and blankets for the sanctuary children and waited outside until someone opened the door. Mira came to the gate. She looked at him. He was standing in a way she had not seen before. Not the stance of an alpha king, not the controlled posture of a man managing how he appears. He was simply standing there, holding blankets, with snow on his shoulders. Waiting to be told where he was useful, she said, "I will not go back to the room where they counted my worth by an empty cradle," he said. "I know," she said. "You may learn fatherhood here." She paused. "But you will not own what the moon gave me," he said. "I understand." He set the blankets and food inside the gate and stepped back. He did not ask to come in. He sat outside the gate for a while before he left. He came the following full moon. He came with practical things: firewood, winter herbs, mending supplies, and the specific care packages that the orphan pups at the sanctuary's eastern room had been asking for, which he had somehow learned about from Captain Soren, who had apparently been making his own unofficial visits. He learned which children needed what. He learned how to be useful in a place where his authority meant nothing, and his presence had to earn its own justification. He learned that showing up consistently with the right things counted for more than arriving with the wrong things dramatically. He left when Mira indicated he should leave. He returned when she allowed it. He did not push for more than was given. Some months after the law passed, on a full moon evening, when the sanctuary children were asleep, and the only sound was the fire and the distant movement of the pines, the moon child reached through the gate bars toward Alaric's hand. The child had not done this before. Mira watched it happen. She was still deciding. She had been deciding for months, and she had not finished deciding, and she understood that deciding was not the same as being ready, and that not being ready was allowed. But she watched the child reach toward him. She opened the gate. She did not declare anything. She did not forgive everything. She simply opened it. She let the beginning be what it was. Not a return, not a restoration. A beginning under law that had changed, in a place built by women who had survived what the palace had done to them, with a child between them who had come to witness rather than to crown. That was enough to start from. The moon sanctuary grew. Women came from the eastern territories and the border settlements and the lower packs and the noble houses where daughters had been measured by fertility and found wanting. Not only banished Lunas, also widows who had outlived their alliances, foster mothers whose bonds had no legal name, healers who had refused to participate in fertility trials and been stripped of their access, women who had simply chosen not to bear children and been treated as failures for the choosing. Children born under the moon to no official bloodline. Children given by circumstance and love and the determination of women who had refused to let exile be the final word on their lives. Mother Celine began a registry, not of successes and failures and fertility scores. A registry of names and histories and what each woman had contributed to the kingdom before the kingdom decided it no longer needed her. The registry grew faster than the sanctuary did. There were more names than anyone had expected. That was the part that was hardest for the Moon Court elders to look at. Not the scale of one woman's harm, the scale of what had been done so routinely that it had stopped requiring justification. Mira made sure no name was entered as a wound only. Beside every harm, she wrote what had survived it. The children raised, the kitchens opened, the borders mended, the songs remembered. The doors kept warm for someone else arriving with nowhere to go. That mattered more than numbers. One evening, a young Luna was brought before the Reformed Council. She had suffered a miscarriage. Old law would have opened a succession review within the month. New law required care before review. The council called for her healer first, then for an independent assessment. Mira arrived with the moon child. Alaric stood beside her. Not ahead. He had been learning the difference. Mira looked at the young Luna. She asked, "Who treated her?" The court went silent. The question was not rhetorical. It was the beginning of an investigation. The council looked at the question rather than looking away from it. This time, they investigated the harm before they looked for the fault. The moon child's light remained steady in Mira's arms, not fading, not flaring, simply present, the same way truth had always been present, waiting for a room where it would be received rather than removed. The Alpha King once banished Mira because the court called her barren. But when the moon goddess placed a child of starlight in her arms, the kingdom learned the truth. Mira had never needed a child to prove she was worthy. The child had come to prove the throne was not.